Welcome to American Catechism by Stab the Dragon Productions for episode number 24. Today I'm introducing a new series on Texas history that will show up just once in a while. But hey, I do live in Fort Worth, Texas, so why not study Texas history? It is a subset of American Catechism. Today is Wednesday, October the 1st, 2025, so it is still Oktoberfest. And here in Fort Worth it is 89 degrees. Today we'll be studying the first battle of the Texian Revolution, the Battle of Gonzales, which happened on October 2nd. So that would be tomorrow, 1835, 190 years ago. I will be sipping on some Ranger Creek Texas Bourbon. There you go. Ranger Creek 36 caliber Texas Bourbon. This bourbon is named for the 36 caliber revolver that the old Texas Rangers carried back in the 1800s. This bourbon is made in San Antonio, Texas and weighs in at 96 proof, costing around $55 for this 750 milliliter bottle. This is in the running for being my favorite Texas bourbon. Ranks up there with Garrison Brothers or Iron Root, a couple of others. This is full of the Texas funk. It's that unique, dusty, smoky sagebrush flavor of charred oak that comes to the whiskey from the extreme climate here in Texas. Now, on to the Battle of Gonzales. The Mexican War for Independence was an 11-year ordeal from about 1810 to 21. Where, through fighting the Spanish Empire and writing a new constitution, the Mexicans finally gained their liberty from Spain. Now, this was all happening alongside and then just after the Napoleonic Wars in Europe, which included the 1808 invasion of Spain by France. Simultaneously, the Americans got involved in a war with Britain that we call the War of 1812. In other words, the world was a mess. Essentially, it was a world war. And it led to Mexican independence, but also it led to a lot of Americans expanding to the Southwest after the Louisiana Purchase from France in 1803. And so America land abutted up against the Texas territories of Mexico, and the border was never really quite resolved. So many Americans slowly drifted into Texas illegally. Imagine that. Illegal immigration into Mexico. Who knew? So finally, in the 1824 Constitution and new government of Mexico, the Mexicans agreed to formally begin allowing the Anglos from America to settle in Texas because the Mexicans needed tax money. They needed some help fending off the Indians. The Mexican government was bankrupt. The land was sparsely settled, and so they needed the Anglos in there to settle the land, and that way they could harvest some tax revenue. But the Anglo population came in with slaves, because most of the population came from the American South, and they were expanding very quickly, so that the Anglos became the majority race in Texas. Interesting. Technically, the Anglos were supposed to swear allegiance to the Mexican government, and secondly, become Catholics. Now, back then they didn't have freedom of religion. America did, but not Mexico. It was a Catholic country. So it obviously didn't really work out very well. By 1830, the Mexican government had changed their constitution again. Outlawed slavery, prohibited new immigration of Anglos because they realized they had a problem, and they increased taxes. Well, that was a great combination, so what do you think would happen with a bunch of Americans in Texas? With the centralizing of power under the new 1835 Constitution and doing away with the 1824 Constitution, Texas and the Anglos were not alone in rebelling. The adjacent Mexican states of Oaxaca and Zacatecas, I think my Spanish sucks, also rebelled. A key point. Other Mexican states were in rebellion, not just Texas. And this rebellion was not merely a bunch of white Anglos taking over Texas. No, the Tejanos joined in with the whites and other Mexican states similarly to rebel against the centralized government that had overthrown the old Constitution and brought in a new one that was very tyrannical. Mexico then was ungovernable, bankrupt. It was a mess. Sounds like today. Santa Anna suppressed the rebellion in Zacatecas brutally, allowing his troops to rape, kill, pillage, and burn. Over 2,000 people were brutally murdered by Santa Anna's troops. They were the non-combatants, just the civilians in the town. So Santa Anna knew that Texas was in rebellion, so he sent hundreds of troops into Texas in September of 1835 to put down said rebellion. A few years earlier, the Mexican army had loaned a small 6-pounder cannon to Gonzales, Texas, to help defend it against the Indians. But now the Mexican army came looking to reclaim the cannon. They wanted their cannon back. So we end up with the Battle of Gonzales, Texas, October 2nd, 1835. A Colonel Ugartequia, commander of the Mexican troops in Texas, sent a detachment, small detachment, just a handful of troops, to retrieve the cannon. And the citizens told that small detachment, no. And so they escorted them out of town. So next, Colonel Ugartequia sent a company of about 100 dragoons under Lieutenant Castaneda to force the town into compliance. The Texians negotiated with and stalled the force for several days, while riders went out in the countryside requesting the Texians to come to their aid. And so by a couple of days later, October 1st, they had about 140 militia, and they planned a night raid on the Mexican camp. So in the early morning hours of October 2nd, the militia wound their way through the fog to the Mexican camp. And somebody, no one knows who, either a Mexican sentry perhaps or a militiaman, opened fire, and the firefight started. It was kind of in the dark, early morning hours. It was a brief firefight, and Castaneda negotiated a withdrawal after sunrise, and the Texians then raised their famous white flag with the black cannon and the words, "Come and take it," mimicking the famous words of Leonidas at the Battle of Thermopylae as the Spartans faced the army of the Persians under Xerxes, Mulan Labi. And so, "Come and take it" became a thing in Texas. There we go. And so in this first skirmish of the war, 2 Mexican dragoons were killed and 1 Texian injured. But it was a clear win for Texas. Now, on to the Ranger Creek Texas Bourbon. Tasting notes. You do get a lot of Texas funk. You get sweet corn, wood, sage, and other spices, even vanilla, some leather, hints of tobacco, maybe chocolate, maybe a little bit of citrus like orange. I gave this bourbon an 83, a letter grade of A+. My recommendation, this is clearly one of my top favorite bourbons of all time. Texas bourbons are controversial. You either love them or you hate them. They are unique. But I am finding that Colorado single malts have a similar profile. Imagine that. Now, so if you can find this or go to the website and order it, I highly recommend it. This is truly epic. If you want to know the taste of Texas, Ranger Creek 36 Bourbon. The details. History. Ranger Creek Brewing and Distilling, or they call it a brewstillery, in San Antonio, was established in 2010, which is like the year after Balcones and Garrison Brothers, at the front wave of the craft distillery boom in Texas. Founded by Mark McDavid, T.J. Miller, and Dennis Rylander, they are one of the few who produce beer for sale as well as whiskeys. The guys who started this originally were just into home brewing of beer, but then they started investigating whiskey because they liked whiskey as well, and single malts, and so they started doing both. And there you go. At the American Craft Spirits Awards, this bourbon has won Best Whiskey and Best in Show. So for history, 5 out of 5. Bottle, label, and marketing. The distillery does have a few videos out that talk about their whiskeys and the distillery, and I found one video that looks like a commercial. I'm not sure who put that out, but it was well done. This bourbon has won some prestigious prizes, like Best in Class, Best in Show that I just mentioned. The bottle is a nice classic shape, including a flared neck, a wood cap with a rubber cork. The label is Western style. There's the rubber cork, which, for traditionalists who like a real cork, I get it, but real corks also self-destruct. Rubber corks last. The label is Western style. Notice it's got the parchment look to it again, the rough torn edges there, kind of a tan brown color, black lettering, and it's not super large, so it does show a lot of the whiskey in the bottle. So for 5 out of 5 points for bottle label and marketing. Appearance of this whiskey, this is reasonably dark. It's not the darkest of whiskeys, but here in the glass, I mean, that's kind of a copper color, copper to bronze. I'm going to give it a light 4. I mean, that's a light 4 in appearance. Composition. This whiskey is grain to glass, Texas. Ranger Creek does it all there. They mash, ferment, age, bottle. They do it all. And it's aged for 2 years, according to several sources that I looked at. I don't know the exact mash bill necessarily, but one source did cite it, saying 70% corn, 16% rye, 14% barley. So I don't know if that's accurate. Only one source told me that. It was Sealbox website. So 14 out of 15 for composition. Well, and on the website and the videos that I watched, they do talk about the different barrel sizes that they use for this. They got the standard 55-gallon barrels, but they also do a lot of stuff with 5-gallon barrels and 15-gallon. So, they experiment with barrel sizes. And this is not the only version of 36 Texas bourbon. They have a cask strength version that goes for about $130 though. And they've got the Rimfire is a single malt. You got some kind of a smaller version of this in a 375 milliliter that's aged in those smaller barrels. So, they do some experimentation with their bourbons, and that's very fascinating. This is the only version I've had, but this is also my second bottle of this, and I'm getting ready. This is almost after tonight. I'm giving this to a friend who's interested in trying it. So, all right. So composition 14 out of 15. Nose. The Texas funk hits me straight away, and then there is some sweetness, sweet corn, perhaps hints of vanilla. The wood, definitely. Some spiciness. Man, I'm getting something like maybe Play-Doh. Some kind of a yeasty, doughy. This is really nice. This is a very nice nose. I mean, this is excellent. 9 out of 10 for the nose. Anytime I can get the Texas funk on the nose, it's a good day. Taste. And the palate is true to the nose, only better. You do get a lot of the Texas funk, the sweet corn, the wood, sage, other spices, some vanilla, the leather, hints of tobacco, and maybe a bit of chocolate, and I think hints of orange. Yeah, if there's any fruit in here, I'm going to say orange. In short, this is a masterpiece. One of my top favorite bourbons. 24 out of 25. Mouthfeel, burn, and finish. Well, it does have a rich mouthfeel. It's creamy, full-bodied. For the proof, I think the burn is a little bit light, so it's kind of smooth. Concentrates in the mouth with a bit going into the back of the throat, but nothing down in the chest, nothing up in the sinuses. And the tingles linger quite a while, as do the flavors, so it does have a long finish. Perhaps a bit drying. Some might complain that the finish has some bitterness to it, but that bitterness I don't view as a negative. I like that. It's related to the Texas funk, which I love, and so, but it lends itself also to the being astringent, drying. But the corn dust, the sagebrush, the charred oak, tobacco leather, those flavors kind of linger on. Some of the spiciness. So, mouthfeel, burn, and finish, I'm saying 14 out of 15. Neat or mixer. Now, I love this one neat. Definitely. But at just over $55, I'm not going to put this in a cocktail. I don't do expensive whiskeys in cocktails. I mean, you can do what you want to do. But for me, no, I'll stick with drinking it neat. I don't even think I would put this on ice. Its burn is so smooth that I seldom do ice with whiskeys. This is just too good. I don't want to dilute it. I don't want to disappear it. So, neat or mixer, 5 out of 5. Price, value, and availability. Total Wine that I checked on their website here in West Fort Worth only had the cask strength version. Again, that was like $130 or some ridiculous price. Specs has this in a $750 for $55.67. Goody Goody had the smaller version, the 375 milliliter version, for $40.59. So you're paying a lot for those smaller editions. So I'm not going to go that route. But the price and value for the product are excellent. It's absolutely worth the $55. This is a favorite. However, availability seems to be somewhat limited, so points off for that. So for price, value, and availability, 8 out of 10. Now, bonus points, easily 5 out of 5 for bonus. This is fantastic stuff. Absolutely. Top favorite Texas Bourbon. There you go. So this gives me a total score of 93 points. A letter grade for drinkability is an A+. My analysis and recommendation. So clearly, for me, it's one of my top faves. I need to do a Texas Bourbon tournament sometime soon because this is going to rank up there with Garrison Brothers, with TX, Iron Root. These are all going to be top tier. Those of you who are used to Kentucky bourbons and have never had a Texas bourbon will not really know what to do with this if you drink it. Texas bourbons are controversial. I get it. You either love them or hate them. They're unique. But again, I'm finding that Colorado single malts have a very similar funk. They got a very similar profile to the Texas bourbons. So I'm going to say that if you can find this or go to the website and you can order it, I highly recommend it. This is truly epic. Okay? So what's up next here on American Catechism or Stab the Dragon? Well, coming up next is going to be, I'm looking at October 3rd as the anniversary of the Battle of Mogadishu, Operation Gothic Serpent. And so for this, I have chosen a 10th Mountain whiskey, 10th Mountain American Single Malt, coming out of Vail, Colorado. And oh my, what a treat this whiskey is. 10th Mountain Division had units there supporting the Rangers in Mogadishu, and so that's why I'm doing this one. So we'll be talking a little bit about the anniversary, the 32nd anniversary of the Battle of Mogadishu and this whiskey. So that's it for now for American Catechism and Stab the Dragon. Out here.